All right, so welcome to another edition of our weekly livecast. As always, we're here on Twitter, going to be answering questions that come in during our livecast today. Today we're kind of going to go over a few things, but we want to focus in on automation. So we want to talk about specifically how practices are working today that aren't using automation, aren't using workflow, and what workflow really does, and why it's so important, and kind of what the attitudes that you need to have in order to be successful. One quick note, last time we had a webinar outside of our weekly live casts with Stimco, our DME partner, and so that one is pre-recorded. You can go see that at any time. And Fabian, who is the director over there at Stimco, actually agreed to be our guest next week. So he'll be answering questions for not only our coaches here, but also for anybody else that has questions about DME or what Stimco does. So pretty excited about that. The other thing is, shameless self-plug, but kind of important. We actually just published another book. This one's called Treat or Be Treated. It'll be on Amazon and Barnes & Noble in the next couple of weeks. There's just one more proof coming in before we do that, but you can get it on the publisher Lulu today. So that link's going to be on Facebook and Twitter as well. Treat or Be Treated, for those that are looking for this, it's just under 200 pages, so pretty easy read. And the book is basically focused around how to better build patient communities, how to build patient communities from the perspective of a clinic owner, a staff member, and a patient. So we really want to kind of understand what each group is looking for, how to maximize that community, and how to do that instead of building, either a treatment center where you think that your patients are just going to come in, or just a business that doesn't really care about your patients. So that's what that book is about, and like I said, those links are live as well. But for today, I think it's going to be a good conversation. I want to talk about task management specific to practices. So when we talk about task management, really what we're talking about is when we're working with a practice owner as a consultant, as a coach, or a staff member working for a practice owner, or really anybody that's involved in the care of a patient, we want to understand how it is that most practices today are dealing with these issues, and why that standard approach is really one of the root causes of major problems. So as always, Jason, our fearless COO, is here to begin our conversation. So Jason, let's start with a conversation about how practice owners and practice staff tend to manage their practices today. And we're talking about the day-to-day tasks associated with patient care.
Yeah, something we deal with quite a bit. Do you mind if I take one step back from that?
I do. Not mind.
Okay. Well, because the short answer is they don't. And so that's why I want to set up that answer a little bit, Reuven, because they go to school, they a lot of times work in a hospital, working as an associate in some other office. They all have experience learning how and treating a patient. They know how to do it. They know how to talk to that patient. They know how to motivate and inspire that patient to make changes in their lives. I mean, in a lot of ways, they're not only selling their care, because the patient's with them and wants to get better, but sometimes they're not motivated to make changes like diet and exercise, right? Like home therapies, like coming back to the office for an entire regimen that needs to be finished. So the doctor knows and loves and is passionate about making that happen, and they know A to Z what has to happen in order to keep that patient coming back.
Right.
They know it. They're good at it. I very rarely meet a doctor who needs any help in that area. But they can't do every step. They can't do A to Z. They're only doing the portion that involves treating the patient, talking to the patient, And then everything else that comes with getting information to, schedule properly, set up a care plan, document properly, make sure that they have everything else set up that they need to, so that patient can make that happen. It has to be delegated to somebody.
Right.
They have to get somebody else to do it in order to see the volume of patients that they need to, not only to keep doors open, but to live a lifestyle, to have a family, to pursue other goals, things like
Right.
that. And so they know what has to happen. They don't write it down because they just know it. But that's fine if you're treating 1 patient, 10 patients, maybe even 50 patients. But the second you start breaking that ceiling of what it is that you can do on your own, you have to create a process and delegate it and then figure out how to verify it. And so that's something, I hate to say it, Reuben, I typically don't find many practices plan for. What they do is they'll cross that bridge when they get to it. When they get to it, they're like, okay, we're missing steps. Patients are either not coming through or they're not getting certain things done, and I know how to help them.
Right.
Here. And so we have a lot of experience with that. So that's why I answer your question kind of a strange way, because no, they don't. They don't know how, they don't plan for it, and they don't know how to do it. When they typically end up doing is opportunistically managing or memory managing each one of those things. They don't have a written down process. They just know what's supposed to happen, and they figured as long as they talk to their staff or yell at their staff enough, their staff will get it.
Right.
And, then the Post-it notes start coming out. Then, okay, Post-it notes aren't working, Reuben. It's time to try a Word document that I wrote up that has every step, and I've now pasted it to the front. And you're gonna look at this when the patient comes in, and the office manager's gonna look at it when the patient goes out, and just make sure everything gets done. That's the next step. And then when that doesn't work, real frustration can set in. So at that point, we have a lot of offices come to us and say, okay, I give up. What is it that we can do? And that's when we start talking about, actual task management. We know a lot of the steps that need to happen. They're the same at every single practice. But then some practices, depending on their specialty, depending on their patient needs, their demographic, where they're located, whether or not they're dealing with, certain types of patients that come from different insurance companies, et cetera, we know what needs to happen. And so we have a system set up to help replicate that A to Z process that the doctor knows will work if he can make sure it happens every single time without missing a step. And we create that process so that an office manager, a front desk staff, an associate doctor that you hire, because now you're big enough to start hiring other clinicians to work in your office. If they follow that, they can measure and see if all the tasks are getting accomplished for that process. And again, I'm only talking about patient care. There are lots of other things that go along with running a business where certain processes have to happen over and over and over again. I'll just give you a couple examples, Reuben. End of the day reconciliation. Patients come in, they pay with checks, they pay with credit cards, you get insurance payments coming in, they get posted either automatically or manually, and you have to go to the bank either at the end of the day, the end of the week, and a certain number of steps have to happen. And you have to make sure that that money makes it into your bank account, and you can compare the two. That's just another example of 3 or 4 steps that have to happen on a regular basis, and you as a practice owner can measure whether or not all of that's happening, and then actually compare the numbers and see, yeah, all the money that was posted in the system made it to the bank account. Just another example. So does that answer your question, or is it?
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, while you were talking about that, we had a few questions come in, and I was just kind of writing down and organizing them. There are a whole bunch of them, but 4 that I wanted to highlight, and these are great questions for you. So the first one came actually from My Chiropractic. You probably are familiar with them. My Chiropractic is Dr. Nona. And she works almost exclusively, I mean, I don't think it's actually exclusive, but almost exclusively with CBP. And CBP is one of the clients of one of our clients, Billing Precision Genesis Chiropractic Software. And she asks, or my chiropractic asks, CBP and their focus, CBP is focused on research-based care, and of course they benefit from the technology. And then name drop, exclamation point, who's doing this really well in the CBP community?
There's a couple. Dr. Yeager, Dr. Paris is the first one that comes to mind, actually. Proven. I don't think he would mind us dropping names, because he's personally got on the phone with a few other doctors at my request and at his coach's request to help out other doctors. And I hope I don't really offend him here if he is to see this a little bit later. He started out good and he just got better. He came on board and said, all right, what I'm doing's not working. Just you tell me what to do, I'll do it. And he made life really simple. And so he has set up checklists upon checklists. Some of them worked. Some of them needed to be dropped completely. And so we tweaked it. And the ones he ended up using, he uses every day. And we're able to measure how the staff actually handles. And most of them have to do with new patients. He's really mostly concerned about making sure his first visit through fourth or fifth visits are flawless.
Now, can you give us an example? I mean, obviously, none of us are going to memorize all these checklists, and that's kind of the point. But can you give us kind of a broad look at what something like that might look like? What one of those?
Can I do you one better, Reuven? Yeah. I want to give a real specific look, not a broad look at something, because we eat our own dog food. It's one of the things that we pride ourselves in, because when somebody comes on board, a new client joins us, we actually have I don't mean to scare anyone here, it's not 72 steps for the practice, but internally we have to make sure that 72 things happen when a new practice comes on board. We use our system to do that. And so can I share screens here? Can I do that, Reuven? And just
absolutely.
Kind of demonstrate that?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm a little new to the technology, so I'm just making sure I've got permission to do that.
You absolutely do.
Yeah. Is it working?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm going to bring you to what's called our Task Manager console. And the first thing I'll show you is what's happening with our staff right now. Here is a look at my entire coaching staff, including me.
Wow.
This is my line, and here is the number of tasks that are active and open for each one of my employees. And just for the sake of the webinar, I'm going to plus it up a little bit here so it's a little bit easier to see. And I can see that I have 9 tasks to do. Dr. Paris's coaching staff, Charlie and Heather, have 12 and 6 respectively. But those are the things that they have to do right now. You can see here that Charlie's got 124 tickets total, or tasks total to do. Heather has 172. I can look at this for any practice, any slice that I want to, but specifically talking about those task checklists that we're talking about, I can go to the integration checklist, and I can look at it from a practice standpoint. So let's do that. It's going to take just a second to run here, Reuven.
Yeah. So while you're doing that, just a quick question. I mean, can you talk a little bit about the difference between the active versus the total backlog? I mean, most people are used to having the entire list, whether it's their total aging report, whether they're doing billing, or their kind of daily to-do list or their to-do list. What's the difference between doing work that way versus the task manager console?
You give your front desk person a task to do. The system automatically identifies if a patient, I'm just going to arbitrarily pick a situation where a task opens up automatically, Reuven. A patient leaves your office without a future appointment. That's in our world, that's no good unless the patient has been discharged, okay?
Right.
So we can, set it up to have, within an hour, within 15 minutes, let's just say, that task open up to the front office. That front office person is going to look at that task and say, oh my gosh, I can't believe we had somebody leave. Let me make a phone call. So that is an active ticket. That's something that is sitting on somebody's active workbench I'll just go back to what an active workbench looks like, Reuven, right now, and
Mm-hmm.
we expect that to be done. So in that moment when that active ticket is done, like Candace's 9 tickets here, let's just look at one of them where actively she's got to make that phone call to that patient.
Mm-hmm.
If she calls, text messages, and emails a couple times in a day and doesn't get that patient, what she's going to do is she's going to notate on that ticket that I called, I emailed, and I text messaged, and I didn't get her. So
Right.
then she's going to push that task to the next day. It's not going to be active anymore today because she's done all that she's going to do with that today. So she's going to take it and not make it active anymore. She's going to push it till tomorrow to actually do something with that ticket. So it'll go from an active pile to this backlog, and it'll become active again tomorrow when she comes into the office.
Got it. Got it. Okay. So we had a question. Oh, go ahead.
We didn't get to finish answering that other question that we were talking about, where we wanted to get specific. Out of those 72 steps that get done here, I mean, this is a big view. I'm looking at every single practice that we've ever integrated. And so what I can see here is all of the ones that are not 100% done in this column.
Right.
I can see here, and I can see what steps they have left. Like this practice has 4 steps left. This practice has 6 steps left. And I can actually, on this practice that has 14 steps left, I can click on it, see what the steps are and who owns them. In this particular case, Amy Wyko, been with us for I think 7 or 8 years, one of our best, has a set of 14 tasks that she still has to do in order to get this practice fully integrated. So what I want our practice owners to think about who are listening, or the front office people, is how many steps are there to getting a new patient started? How many steps are there for retaining a patient? What things do you need to make sure got done?
Right.
If 100% of them aren't done, do you have a view to go look at this and then say, oh my gosh, Tim, didn't do this step. Let's figure out why. Does Tim need to be trained on it? Is it an extraneous step? Why isn't it getting done? So I just wanted to put a bow on that last question that we were answering.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, so yeah, we definitely have a number of people here who are asking questions.
Okay.
The next one that I want to look at, Bradley Deacon. Bradley Deacon, a consultant, asks, how do you handle care plans, I guess case management, with these tasks?
So let's just define a care plan first, right? From our perspective, a care plan is going to be 2 things in the system. It's going to be a financial agreement, right? Making sure we understand exactly how much the number of visits that were prescribed for that individual patient are going to cost to get them, out of acute care. Right. And how many visits going to take, so we can schedule those visits. So those are the 2 aspects of a care plan that we're talking about. When we actually have a situation where a visit is outside of a care plan, or let's just say a visit is not billed in a care plan, we have automation that will actually open up these tasks. They're not a part of a checklist per se. It was Bradley, right, Reuven?
Yep, Bradley Deacon.
Bradley Deacon. It's not necessarily part of a checklist, but it's just part of an automated process that will look at any patient, look at the care plan that's active, look at the date range and the financial that it's covering, and anything that falls out of it, it'll open up a task to the right person to cover it. The other part of the automated process is, let's just say it's an insurance patient that moves over to cash. It'll automatically handle the financial aspect of that by writing off balances that are supposed to be written off, maybe even averaging out the charges that are supposed to be patient responsibility across the entire care plan, so that there's not a big shock to the wallet when the patient actually has to move from an insurance to cash. But there's a lot more we could say about care plans. I hope that answers this question.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the big takeaways there are really the definition of a care plan as being beyond just a bunch of visits, but actually first and foremost a financial agreement where we agree to do things a certain way financially, and then that wraps around the actual care of the patient and when their appointments are. You're coming in once a week for physical therapy, 3 times a week for chiropractic care, maybe you're doing lab tests, maybe you're doing medical examinations, balance tests. I mean, it depends on the specialty, all that plays a role. And I'm just writing down here the next question that I thought was really cool because it relates to one of the blog posts that our CEO, Yuval, posted a while back. This is from Bernard Perrin. He said, loved the video where Yuval discusses the right and wrong square. Oh yeah, I remember that one. And asks, how does task management or the task management console play a role in avoiding the wrong square?
Well, we'll have to quickly define the right and wrong square, Reuven, for anybody else who's listening in. Anybody who does a great job, let's just say, and then gets paid for that great job is considered in the right square, right? You did the work and you got credit for it. Or anybody who sat home, didn't do the work and didn't get paid for it is also in the right square. You didn't do it and you didn't get paid or get the credit for it, right?
Right.
There is the ideal square, which unfortunately I think a few people in this country have found themselves in, where they didn't do any work and got paid or got credit for something, which is ideal but not realistic, right?
Right.
But then the worst are the dumb squares. We've referenced it. I'm sure we could find a better way of describing it. The dumb square is where you did the work and then didn't get paid for it.
Right.
And this is probably the most frustrating thing that I found any doctor has ever experienced. Treating a patient and then not getting paid, either by the patient or by the insurance company. And typically what's happened is they provided great care, but a step in a process was missed. A step in a process with a patient who is going to pay out of pocket with check, cash, whatever it's going to be, Reuven, where we didn't set it up properly, or we didn't set up recurring payments, and we didn't set up automation to make sure that if visits were outside of a care plan, we didn't notify somebody because there is no financial agreement to get paid for that visit. Those things put you in the wrong square. And we don't ever want that to happen. Or an intake process that doesn't do pre-auths, eligibility verification, or let's just say making sure that if any visit falls outside of an authorization or eligibility, whether or not we know it prior to treating the patient so we can fix it so we don't find ourselves in the wrong square after that.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think is often missed, whether it's in business or in healthcare, and this kind of speaks to a question from Alexander Whitecomb, who asks, how do we track all of this? How do we keep track of no future appointments, tasks, and all that? And I think one thing that is often missed, and I kind of drew it really basically here. Let's see if that comes across to everybody. But basically, what we're talking about is what's the most critical thing, right? And everybody will come to you and you'll say at the end of the day, the most critical thing is the care of the patient and the revenue, the dollars that come in, so that we can keep taking care of patients and build the lifestyle that we want as clinicians. And unfortunately, if you don't have the right foundation, and Jason, I mean, you can correct me here, but if you don't have the right foundation in your core beliefs, in your perspective, and what you value most, both at a big view and in a small view, you can't quantify a single thing, a single goal to achieve that you're going to get any buy-in from your staff, let alone your patients. Does that make sense?
Well, we talked about this in the first webinar that we did, Reuven. Was a lot of times practice owners come on board and then tell their staff what's going to happen next. And typically that doesn't go well. They want the staff members to have autonomy and buy-in for what they're doing. And the most successful practices I find hire people who are on their mission, or at least they know that they can bring those people along for the ride, meaning they can get them on their mission eventually, and then they include them because they're on their mission in the decision-making process. So they look at I don't know if you can look at my screen right now, they look at a new patient checklist, which makes sure that everything's done, and they don't ever scoff at it. They say, absolutely, we won't let a single patient go through this office without making sure everything is done, so we, number one, can treat the patient with the best possible care that they can receive anywhere, and number two, get paid for our efforts. They
Right.
love it. They embrace it. They're like, yes, you're going to hold me accountable, because not only am I in this practice to make a living for me and my family, but I'm going to make sure these patients get better, and that, you know, our mission in this community is known to be pure and the best.
And I think, I mean, you know, I think one of the simplest ways to look at something like that is like office staff love. It's the idea that the most important person in the practice is not the clinician, it's not the practice owner, but it's the people on the front lines. I mean, it's the patient really, but you know, I think, and I speak from my own consulting and coaching, but I think that any of us who have had a great degree of success with our clients, not only is it a belief system that the practice owner has, but the office staff are the ones that truly fell in love with the process, with the perspective, and with the workflow. Is that right?
Yes, it is right. I don't have anything to add to that, because I think you said it
Well,
really,
I mean,
really well.
yeah. I mean, if you think about it, you know, when you're, and we're just wrapping up here, a couple of minutes to go, and I mean, I think one of the biggest takeaways from any discussion about task management, about what's important, has to be this idea that your office staff is key. You know, and just from the questions that we saw come in today about what, you know, consultants are seeing that their practice owners and their practice staff are asking questions about, it's clear that the questions are really about the front line. It's about the interaction with the patient. And I think as coaches ourselves, as consultants, as you know, as anyone that's trying to help a practice do better, I think, you know, focusing in on that office staff, knowing that there are going to be challenges there, is the key, is really the door that opens up to all that wonderful possibility, right?
Well, and if you really care about them, if you really care about that staff, the practice owner is going to spend the time, and they're going to use tools that are available, like this Task Manager console, to go ahead and look and make sure at the end of the day the tasks are at zero. And if they're not, let's just say it's, you know, 7:30 tonight, and I'm able to click on Charlie's workbench here, and I'm able to see the things that haven't been done,
Right.
and have that sobering conversation that says, you tell me, what do I need to do to help you finish this? And this tool allows you to have that conversation with a staff member, offer the support and the guidance that they need in order to get it finished, and at that point, that employee or staff member can demonstrate to you that, number one, that they're in it to win it, they're going to make changes and they're going to learn, or you're going to figure out that your process needs some tweaking. Either way, it can be a great result.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. All right, well, I think at this point, let's kind of call it for today. Next week, as I mentioned, we're going to have our guest Fabian Cruz from Stimco. We're going to be talking all things DME. So my goal here is to get all of our coaches, from a selfish perspective, to ask lots of questions and to better understand you know, all things DME. And of course, whether you're a consultant listening in, so talking to Bradley Deacon, Mackenzie Barber, Bernard Perrin, Alexander Whitecomb, and everybody else that was here today that I didn't get to answer all of your questions. Definitely make sure that you submit your questions. We're going to go ahead and answer those after the fact as well. And of course, whether you're a coach or not, you should absolutely pick up a copy of this book, because more than anything else, I want to know what you guys think. So thanks, everybody, and we will see you next week.
Thanks, guys.